Gemini. This is your post-Saturn and Pluto conjunction report with astrology and Akashic Tarot. My name is Dee, and I'm coming to you from CatalystEnergies, where the mission is to facilitate the activation of our highest potential. And thanks for joining me. I'm really so grateful that you're here. This report is for Gemini Sun, Gemini Moon, and Gemini Rising. And there's been so much anticipation and energy and just looking forward to this conjunction with Saturn and Pluto, because it's been so formidable and so powerful and doesn't happen very often. The last time that Saturn and Pluto came together in the same sign was in the early 80s, and that was in Libra. So this is now finishing a cycle that had to do with reforming our concept of relationships and how we show up in partnership over the last 30 years or so. And now that Saturn and Pluto have moved into the sign of Capricorn, and now it's about the material structures that we're creating, the long-term structures that last not just our lifetime, but several lifetimes, and it's about ambition and the bottom line and larger institutions. And so this conjunction has affected everybody in a very significant way on this planet. Everybody has Capricorn in their chart somewhere. So for Geminis, this is happening in your 8th house. All of this Capricorn energy is in your 8th house, and that is the Scorpio house. It's a water sign, and it has to do with the responsibility of sharing resources. You know, Scorpio is usually considered a very intense, emotional, dark sign, interested in the realms of the occult and the subconscious and the shadow and death, absolutely. But really what it's about is, when we've moved from the 7th house of partnerships and contracts, the 8th house is where we start to look at the power dynamics that are inherent in relationship, because that is where trust and intimacy really come about, is through shared resources. And that could be material resources, that could be energetic resources, emotional resources, and physical material resources as well. And so there's responsibility that comes along with when you enter into partnership, and the resources that you share as a result of that. Real intimacy comes from trust of the other people involved, and there is responsibility to that power. And so for Gemini, there's been a lot of energy in Capricorn, not only giving you messages from Mercury and kind of illuminating this part of your chart with the sun, but Saturn and Pluto coming together is solidifying something that has been being reformatted, has been kind of broken down by Pluto over time, since 2008 really, moving through Capricorn and breaking it down and essentially destroying our conceptions of this, and then in order for something new to transform. And that is the essence of the 8th house. The 8th house is in terms of a seasonal cycle, Scorpio time of year is when the harvest has happened and everything is starting to die in the natural world in terms of an annular growing cycle. And it's the realization that some part of us needs to die in order for something new to grow. And when it comes to partnerships, it's our ego death in some ways that is what allows for us to see that there's a third entity in some ways when we come into partnership that we are now taking care of. It's not just our needs anymore, but it's the needs of the shared relationship at that point. And that could be resources such as money and business and emotional resources. Absolutely, this is where intimacy comes into relationship and sexuality. So with Capricorn being in the 8th house, there is a tendency for Gemini to really show up and really look at this realm of life, these darker places, the subconscious, the shadow realm, really, the realm of death and rebirth. Gemini really takes this position very seriously. It's very material. There is an ambition involved with getting to the bottom of things when Gemini has this 8th house. And so the opposition, where the north node of the moon is in Cancer, and is in the 2nd house for Geminis. And so the 2nd house is about the actual resources that we possess. What do we have access to in our physical world that we can use to build something? And it has to do with our actual bodies, the house or our shelter. It has to do with our actual money, the money we have access to, the material possessions we have access to that we surround ourselves with. And it also has to do with the energetic resources that we have at our disposal to create something. And so Gemini, there's a lot of attention here on the 8th house about the shadow place and the shared resources and what it means to share resources and be responsible for that. But the North Node, where we're collectively being drawn to, this nurturing Cancer energy, is showing Gemini that you in fact have this nurturing quality, this ability to hold space emotionally for yourself and others as one of your resources. It's what you have available in your physical environment in order to make use of, and it is the soil from that you are planted in. If the 1st house is your seed point or your actual seed, then the 2nd house is the soil, and where you're planted is in a container that allows you to be emotionally vulnerable. And it's also what you have access to. And so Geminis are really encouraged to look toward what they have in their physical environment, their material life, the world around them that is emotionally sustainable, which is secure, allows for security, emotional security and vulnerability, because a lot of how you see your relationship to others when it comes to shared resources and intimacy is very much being transformed and constantly being attention being brought to it right now. You also have Uranus going direct in your 12th house, which is the house of endings. It's the house of our ancestral karma. It is the ocean of all creation, really. It's this unboundaried, undifferentiated return to source. It is our spiritual life. It is the ashrams and the prisons and mental hospitals and also medical hospitals. It's these institutions that draw us away and out of society in order to get back in touch with ourselves and our connection to the divine, whatever that is. And now that Uranus, the great awakener, very futuristic and innovative, has moved direct in your 12th house, there is certainly maybe a drastic shift in how you identify yourself within the context of your spiritual life. And it's very physical for Geminis. It has a lot to do with how this spiritual life and spiritual presence manifests very physically. And Uranus is in fall and Taurus, and so it doesn't have the most power, but it is moving direct now and is innovating and showing you options for you to be free. And there is a desire to be free spiritually within this context. And so we could be feeling a lot of we could be feeling some tension with this movement towards wanting to manifest something spiritual very physically for ourselves, and at the same time the shadow realm is and the realm of our subconscious and our darkness and the places that we don't really want to look, because then we have to see how we act within the context of a power dynamic, and that's usually where people don't want to see. That's really getting a lot of attention with Capricorn, and Geminis might have the potential to act like a boss when it comes to how they interact within the context of a relationship, like their shadow self being very materialistic and very focused on the bottom line. And that's getting shook up a lot right now, and with wanting to manifest physically this spiritual connection through the 12th house, and having Uranus be very quick and very innovative and very lightning bolt type of energy, and like a push, like for freedom. There is some tension there right now between that drive for the spiritual life and this reconfiguration of how you approach shared resources within the context of relationships. But again, the second house and the North Node of Cancer is really drawing you as Geminis back to what it is you do have for you. And it is this nurturing emotional support and root system that is the essence of your physical life that you have. Mars is moving through Sagittarius in your 7th house of relationships, and Mars is the action hero and is in a fellow fire sign of Sagittarius, and so it's very optimistic and looking at seeking the truth and really acting out of beliefs. So this could certainly easily go out of control, but in the context of your partnerships and contracts, it's really blazing a path into how you show up in these partnerships and potentially giving you another perspective in which to understand your role in relationships. And Mars is very courageous, and so it's kind of pressing forward very ambitiously and is very confident that he's going to find the truth of the situation. So harness that, Gemini, because that is air and fire signs are very they really match each other in terms of their energy. They're both yang energy, they're both masculine energy, and so it's something that Gemini is very comfortable with. It is the opposite of Sagittarius, though, oddly enough, and so it is kind of goes against the feeling of who you are, but I would say tap into Mars because he's showing you the bigger picture of how you can successfully be in the context of relationships. Venus has moved into Pisces now, and Neptune has been there, and this is your 10th house of your career and your public persona, what you are bringing to the table with the community, what it is that you've come into this life to create and are responsible for creating for not just yourself, but for everybody around you. And it is about ambition and the bottom line and very materialistic, the reality that we do live in material world and what we need to build things to provide a structure for us in this material reality, and everybody has something that drives them towards and something that they're responsible for creating. And for Geminis, you have Pisces as your 10th house, which is love and compassion and spirituality and creativity and artistic focus. And with Neptune here for so long, I think it's been very foggy and it's been really hard to grasp what that really means for Geminis. It's been very elusive. Things could have been like really coming in through the dream state, or potentially even other like meditations and other places where you are shifting your consciousness to kind of dissolve back into a higher awareness. But now that Venus is here, it's making it much more tangible and real and giving you an idea of how to physically and materially manifest what it is you want to be doing for your career, what you, whatever that is. That doesn't have to be like your job necessarily, but what is it that you are here to build for at the sake of everyone, for humanity. And I think that Venus coming in is a really nice opportunity to start manifesting these things for Gemini, specifically in their house of career. And so you're really meant to be in a career that's artistic and about love, like the spiritual love, and to the healing arts, absolutely, and to be very compassionate, something that's very compassionate and artistic and loving, something that's dissolving the boundaries a little bit between you and other, because Pisces has no boundaries. It's all, it's all water. So Pisces, definitely worth looking at how Pisces moved through your 10th house right now to give you a sense. Things are going to start becoming really tangible when it comes to your career and where you're wanting to build on that. So with the Akashic Tarot reading, I've already pulled the cards, and we're going to go through and get some extra guidance and some insight to reinforce what the astrology is already showing for Gemini. So the energy that's being brought into the situation, that's been already happening, has been kind of cultivated and worked on. This might even be what's happened as a result of the conjunction itself that happened a few days ago. And we have this is an Ascended Master, Hilarion. Number 5, and so Hilarion is an ascended master of research and scientific inquiry and the mind, which is an amazing card for a Gemini, obviously. Gemini being all about the mind. So there has been a lot of research and logical, analytical thinking that's come into this situation. There's certainly been a lot to think about, and there's been a lot to research and to make sense of. And I think that Geminis have been thinking a lot about what's going on and taking a logical approach and considering things from a very analytical and logical perspective. You know, Geminis are so much in the mind right now, and always really being a Gemini. So there's this approach that you've been working with that has allowed you to be a little bit, I wouldn't say detached, but just like, you know, very very detail oriented and very very much willing to dig in deep to the research and to be logical about what's going on, and to not really jump to any conclusions. So Hilarion is a very learned ascended master, and again, it's all about the logic, it's all about the research, it's all about science. And this is the energy coming into the situation for Gemini right now. I've been very you know, very focused on trying to make sense of everything mentally and not afraid to look deeply into the aspects that Gemini's trying to figure out right now. So that's what's coming into the situation. What's happening now, what's at the heart of the matter for Gemini, is the Two of Forces. So the Forces are more of a fire energy, kind of like the wands in traditional tarot. And this is the willow. And the interesting thing about the willow tree is that it's very deeply rooted, absolutely, but then it also has the flexibility and the malleability to sway in the wind, but also to be firm and strong. This is a great reading for Gemini so far. I mean, it's really suggesting that you're going with the flow, that you're very deeply rooted in the soil, but you're also, and right by the stream here, this is so wonderful, and the sun kind of like shining out from behind it. Everything, you have everything you need. You're very strongly rooted. You're getting sunshine as a willow. This is, you know, this is the very beginning, and it's very balanced. You know, all of the aspects of it are very balanced. And there's not a lot of action in this card. It's more about all of the pieces are in place for a steady growth of, you know, this tree is rooted, but also is completely able to sway with the wind. And this is a very awesome card when it comes to this North Node in Cancer in your second house, because it is very much, you know, the roots in the earth and allowing you to move around and to feel solid and to feel protected and to feel stable. This is a great reading for Gemini. So what's going on in the focus? Conscious, like the conscious awareness, what Geminis are focused on, what's sitting at the front of their mind, what kind of maybe like messages are coming in from above necessarily. It's just what you're aware of consciously, you're thinking about and ruminating on. Oh, that's fascinating. So number 12 is the scribe. So if Hilarion is the researcher, the scribe is the individual in a society that records everything. And in more traditional cultures, more earlier ancestral cultures, the scribes were the most learned, they were most educated people in a community, because they had to write everything down. So everybody gave them their information, and then they recorded it to make sure that everything was recorded, that it was written down, that is kept track of. And so the scribes become very educated because they have to learn a lot of different subjects in order, and even languages, in order to be able to transcribe all of this stuff. Geminis, you've been really, you've been really working hard. There's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of mental and logical consideration and there's definitely a focus on recording it and putting it into some sort of transcribed form, and to continuing to educate yourself in order to keep taking in more information. There's definitely now, I can feel that there's this strong connection to research and information gathering and taking in as much information as possible in order to understand really what's happening for you as things are shifting. And that makes sense to not, especially for Gemini, not to necessarily dig too deep into the underworld, with the 8th house being so strongly impacted right now. Geminis are really using their minds to their fullest ability at this point, and really taking in a lot and learning a lot and focused on learning a lot, and very balanced. This Two of Forces, it's very balanced, it's rooted. The willow is getting all of its needs met, and the sun is shining, and it's also able to move with the breeze, which suggests that like ideas are coming in and they're going out, and you're willing to move with them, and that's a very Gemini thing too. Never attaching to any one idea, just letting all the ideas come in. So that's very much, you're very much connected to your sign right now in terms of what you stereotypically as a Gemini would do, which is really act in the mind, even though so much of what's being aspected in your chart is so much water and earth, which is fascinating. It's great that you're using your mind so much. So what's in the subconscious? What's going on under the surface that we're not quite aware of as Geminis? What is kind of running in the background and definitely influencing our decisions, or at least our responses to things? Interesting. So this is the Five of Forces. So we have Two of Forces and then Five of Forces, but it's reversed. And so this is a duality type of energy as well, in that we have the summer landscape and then we have a winter landscape. And for you, you had the winter landscape upright, so this card would be reversed in terms of what is going on under the surface for you. There is certainly a contraction happening. There is a dormant period, or a feeling of dormancy, a feeling of contraction, maybe everything covered in snow, not a whole lot of growth under the surface. It's almost like, because things are going into hibernation in the winter, it's not that all the plants are necessarily have died, they've just gone dormant, and all the animals are hibernating, and everything is just quiet and really contracted and in this dark space during the winter. And this feels way more like the 8th house for Gemini, because while there is a lot of activity and mental activity happening for you all actively, what's going on under the surface is very much dormant, very much contracted, very much yin energy, and is kind of waiting, waiting for the, going through the cycle. Not really coming to any firm conclusions, because everything is kind of covered in snow. You can't really do anything until things thaw out and the spring comes. So there's certainly in the roots here this idea of that it's not quite time to make any decisions, but everything is set up into place, that you're collecting and gathering information, you're transcribing it, you're educating yourself, you're very much rooted in this present moment in terms of a creative energy, and getting all of, being able to move in the wind like the willow tree, but being firmly rooted. But really at the core here, deep down, what's going on subconsciously, what you're not aware of, is this dormant period that things aren't really happening. So what do we expect from all of this? What is the likely effect in a cause and effect relationship for Gemini? Oh, that's wonderful. So this is number 10. So you have a lot of major or trump cards in this reading. 5, 10, and 12. So Hilarion might be the Ascended Master of Research, but 10, the Light of the World, is really like the Hermit card, in the sense that it's not the hermit being a hermit, but is why the hermit does what the hermit does, which is to cultivate inner mastery in order to be the light of the world. And you notice he's got the lantern, and he's got the halo around his head, and he's coming to knock on the door of this young man who doesn't even realize, and there's a cat kind of grabbing his attention and being like, hey, guess what? Something's happening. Gemini, what you're collecting and you're gathering, you know, there is a dormant period, but it's because you are ruminating on so much information, and you're trying to educate yourself and collect as much data as possible, and collect so many resources. That, I mean, that is what's happening too during the winter time, is everything's getting, the soil is being a time to rest. But really what's going to come forward is you stepping into this role as the light of the world, you know, using this dormant period really, and this time to gather information to eventually come back out and be of service to the world. And your let's see here, your north node, not your north node, the north node in Cancer in your second house of material resources. This is what you have at your disposal, is this ability to be compassionate and accepting and nurturing of people, because really we're all fulfilling some sort of mission, especially you with a 10th house in Pisces. Like, you have your career is a spiritual mission, and right here, this is what's happening. The light of the world is coming out to provide this spiritual mission. But right now, and that's what to expect. So right now, you're gathering all the information. You are very stable in this, and in your root, in your energetic root, and in your subconscious, you're really just dormant, just waiting for the snow to melt so then you can come back out and be the light of the world. And I feel like that's what Saturn and Pluto has like really reconfigured, and all this Capricorn energy about how to share resources. It's changing your perception of what it is what it means to be responsible, and what it means in the context of a relationship, and what it means to be responsible for shared resources. I think that's getting an overhaul, and eventually, and as you collect all this information about yourself and about the way you show up in relationships, Mars and Sagittarius, when the snow melts and things are not dormant anymore, that's when you get to come out and show your light to the world. So Gemini, this has been a great reading for you, I think. You've had a lot to focus on, but using your mind right now is working to your advantage of collecting data and researching things very, very strongly so that you really understand yourself, so you can move forward with your mission and live the best life possible. So I'm going to leave it at that, Gemini. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and thank you for subscribing if you feel so inclined to do so because of this video. If you're interested in reaching out to me at CatalystEnergies, you can find all my information in the description box below, and you can book services directly through my Facebook page online, and it's really convenient that way. And I have a number of services that meet a variety of financial needs in terms of rates. And yeah, I think that's all I have for you, Gemini. So until next time, please take care of yourself and each other. I'll see ya. Bye. Hey, Gemini, I totally forgot to pull your animal messages cards, and everybody else has got one, and I would feel so sad to have cut you off from that. So this is the spirit message from animal guides, and I've been saying this on every video, that the animals and the plants are our family, and they have a lot to teach us, and that's why I really like to pull these cards as some extra guidance for what we're dealing with and what lies ahead, and how best to utilize the information that's just been presented to you, Gemini. So we're going to pull 2 animal cards here as guidance for Gemini Sun, Gemini Moon, and Gemini Rising. Alright, let's see here. 2 cards for Gemini. Oops. This one wants to come out. And one more. Oh, there it is. Alright, so we'll do the one that came face up. It says, use both your intuition and your intellect to solve the problem or get answers to your questions. The chimpanzee. Well, we know you're using your intellect. That is for sure. So definitely be willing to tap more into your intuition as well. The thing about Hilarion, he is an ascended master. And so not only is he all about research and scientific inquiry, he uses his intuition because he understands that that is a integral part of using your full intellect. I mean, you can't just use your mind alone. Your intuition definitely is a really good guidance system. So putting those two things together, I think, is the way to go, Gemini. And the other card we have for you is the Chameleon. Stay in the background and adapt to the situation rather than being conspicuous and attempting to direct the course of events. Now, this is interesting because the first thing I thought of for you was the fact that in the position of the subconscious and the energetic roots is the winter time, and we can't rush the cycle of nature. It follows her own, she follows her own path, and it is perfectly timed for what everything needs. And so rather than, it's not so much staying in the background and blending in, but it's more about not forcing anything and just being part of the natural cycle. And right now things are dormant, and it might not be something that you're consciously aware of, but it is what's rooting you to the situation, and you have to align with it and accept that that is the natural cycle and that it will in fact end at some point. So it's best to just, you know, take a step back, blend into the landscape a little bit and be part of it in order to you know, flow with the natural cycle, because it is a natural flow, and things are going to start to awaken for you, Gemini, in not that long. I mean, actually, Mercury is moving into Aquarius tomorrow as I'm filming this, and so that's going to be your ruling planet moving into an air sign is really going to, you know, is really going to kick things into gear mentally. So it won't take long, but just try not to force anything. You know, you can't direct the course of events, so you might as well be part of the natural landscape, just like the chameleon. Anyway, so that actually is the end for you, Gemini. So take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.